Hello, my name is Jessica Hawkins, and I'm here today to talk to you about water quality. This is part of my project, my media project for my literature and environment class. My thesis, although the global decline in the quality of water is known to affect all aspects of life, two main chemicals introduced by humans are catalysts for this major environmental problem: phosphorus and nitrogen. I will prove my thesis through the literary readings and analysis of information that I've gained this summer through the two classes that I have taken. I hope you enjoy. The harm in nitrogen and phosphorus in our drinking water and what they can do to help prevent it. Course goal and learning objectives for this presentation. We're going to use learning objective number 2 that states to understand specific environmental issues that are dramatized, objectified by creative imagination in literary form and may be able to address permanent and unavoidable concerns about the quality of life and in ethics of survival on the green planet Earth. Course goal number 4 is to increase the students' understanding of eco-criticism and the interdisciplinary study of the relationship between literature, the physical environment, so that a particular body of knowledge that emerges from reading and analyzing literary environmental texts may be integrated, synthesized, and consolidated with reference to a set of informed, responsible principles derived from ecology, literary criticism, language, and ethics. Survey that I did for another class where water quality was identified. Next, I completed a community health statistical analysis where the rating system of water quality was identified, linking runoff to water quality. According to Healthy People 2020, surface and groundwater quality concerns apply to both drinking water and recreational waters. Contamination by infectious agents or chemicals can cause mild to severe illness. Protecting water sources and minimizing exposure to contaminated water sources are important parts of environmental health. In this class, I have read numerous pieces, and I began to relate to the comments made about water quality and the soil erosion on a personal level. I'm married to a farmer, and I have children who want to continue our farm. I recently composed a facility policy on prevention and detection of Legionella out of the water system and learned a phenomenal amount from that. Knowledgeable interest sparked a desire to understand more and share with others. And I must say that part of this water quality concern started about 5 years ago when my boys and I went to Zambia on a mission trip. And so I was concerned then about, how we would stay safe with our water. And so it kind of started at that point in time. How does nitrogen and phosphorus get into our drinking water? What are the risks of consuming water with too much nitrogen and phosphorus? What can we do to prevent nitrogen and phosphorus getting into our drinking water? Research question number 1, water quality. Water is necessary for life. Water quality prevents illness. Water is used in literature to relay messages. The EPA correlates a healthy watershed to drinking water. The EPA's method is complex and uses 15 indicators such as pH, chemicals, metals, and bacteria. Research question number 2. How does nitrogen and phosphorus get into our drinking water? It gets in there from runoff from farming chemical use. Also, from poor water flow systems put into place, and inappropriate animal waste management. I found this picture that talked a little bit about water pollution, and I find it very interesting that they say that 97% of the Earth's water is either salty or polluted. And this shows some about surface runoff, stream flow, where the water goes into the oceans, all of those sorts of things. And it adds a little bit in there too about pollution from the air. And that's not really what we're talking about here, but that could be something that we would want to talk about at some point in time. So phosphorus is a common component of agricultural fertilizers, manure, and natural wastes in sewage and industrial discharge. It's crucial for plant life, but too much in water causes euphoration, a decrease in dissolved oxygen in the water, affected by a rise of mineral and natural nutrients of rivers and lakes. Soil erosion is a major contributor to phosphorus in streams, and too much phosphate can cause health problems such as kidney damage and osteoporosis. Nitrogen or nitrates in water. Nitrates, NO3, are a source of nitrogen for plants. Nitrogen fertilizers may be carried by rain, irrigation, and other surface waters to groundwater. Human and animal waste can also contribute to nitrate contamination of water. Shallow or poorly constructed or improperly located wells are more susceptible to contamination. High nitrate levels often indicate the presence of other toxins, such as disease-causing organisms, pesticides, or other inorganic and carbon-based compounds that could cause health problems. Elevated nitrate levels have been known to cause a blood disorder in infants under 6 months of age called methylglobinemia, or blue baby syndrome, and it can be fatal. And I guess another reason why this came up as being important to me was that here where we live, north of Smith Center, we have a very clay-based soil, and we also have high nitrates in our well water at times, and so we're hooked onto the rural water. But many years ago, before we lived here, which I've lived here for almost 22 years, so many years ago, when they had the well first put in and there was some flooding and the nitrates went a little high, the cattle that were drinking the well water died. And so the farmers here had quite a loss from the nitrates being too high in the well water. Water. I thought that this picture of the different waters was kind of interesting, and you may be somewhere from time to time, and the color of the water coming out of the faucet may not be very appealing. So what you need to do is be educated, manage the watershed where you can, advocate for safe agricultural practices, use chemicals only as the label directs, and dispose of chemicals properly. People need to be educated so that they can make intelligent and moral choices. Supporting research to validate the thesis. A water quality report and context, legislation, the water systems, testing water systems, and decontamination. So this one is the first one, which is water quality report and contacts. The first association I had with the water quality report had to do with my research for the Legionella project that I did for work. Part of my work function is epidemiology and infection prevention. And so this was something that I had to study a little bit to learn. In the end, I want to say that public water systems are not allowed to produce water that is not safe for human consumption. So even though we're going to talk about some water quality reports and actually some ratings, Smith Center was actually rated 30 on a scale of 100 according to Sperling's Best Places. The problem had to do with runoff and the groundwater more than your drinking water. So when we talk about EPA calculating that, that's kind of a misnomer a little bit. And also the other thing is that these evaluations that are done by EPA are done at least every 2 years, but not necessarily every year. So I think that that's important to know that as well. So the state of Kansas requires the water district to monitor for specific contaminants. And so in order to get a copy of this water report, you can get it online a few different places, and I've shown where we've gotten ours down there. But you can get it through your city clerk, or you can call the Kansas Bureau of Water. Congress passed the Safe Drinking Water Act in 1974 and amended and reauthorized it in 1986 and in 1996. It's a federal law that ensures the quality of Americans' drinking water. EPA is authorized to determine national standards for drinking water, to guard against health illness from ingestion or contact with naturally occurring and manufactured pollutants. Drinking water standards only apply to public water systems and not individual or private wells, which is where the people that lived here before we lived here that had the cattle die had the issue with. And the EPA helps states, localities, and water suppliers to ensure these standards. The water systems. So there are community water systems, non-transient, non-community water systems, and transient non-community water systems that are all monitored by the EPA. So our CWSs deliver water to the same population year-round. So that would be somebody in your home, your apartment, or a complex. About 52,000 systems serving the majority of the U.S. population. The NTWCWS offers water to the same people equal or greater than 6 months a year, but not a complete year. So that'd be your schools, factories, churches, office complex that have their own water systems, roughly 85,000 systems, and the TNCWS deliver water where their people do not linger for lengthy episodes. For example, gas stations and campgrounds. So there's nearly 18,000 systems there. Thought it was interesting how that was all separated. Your home well tested and follow up with testing recommendations and treatment. To do this, you can contact the KDHE Bureau of Water, which we talked about earlier, and then also your extension agents should have that information for you. So for Smith Center, I put down the extension agent there. Her name is Sandra. And decontamination. Drinking water contaminants such as bacteria are treated with chlorine-based chemicals, and they last longer. The chemicals that they use to treat, it's not too much chlorine to be able to ingest, but it does break down a lot slower in the water system. The half-life is longer. And the ultraviolet light kills everything instantly, all the bacteria that's in your water system. However, the bacteria can start growing momentarily after that occurs. So some systems use both chlorine and ultraviolet. And I studied this quite a bit when I was doing my Legionella project because our water system to the hospital comes to us from the city. And so I needed to ensure how they were disinfecting the water and what their processes were. Research was done through the assignments of our class. We had novels and then weekly readings. In the weekly readings, I tried to pull apart how I decided that they validated my thesis. So water is an essential for life and plants, humans, and animals. When we choose not to protect our water sources, they can cause our demise. Water can sustain life or take it depending on the environment it's in. Water signifies purity and peacefulness. Water can be contaminated. Water has history. Water is a relationship partner. Water warnings, holistic analysis, Water is a gift, water is violent and damaging, and how water was personal to the authors. The two novels that I chose to use as supporting literary research, I did put in the third novel a little bit later, but I didn't put it in at this slide as the main two that I used. The Monkey Wrench Gang and the Sand County Almanac. I loved both of them for very different reasons. You can see the difference between the two of them. One was fictional, one was non-fictional, even though they both had a non-fiction basis. One was action, one was education. Four individuals acting on a passion with varied reasons to. Seldom Seems Smith, I thought was kind of an interesting character, long, lanky, polygamist, but he also wasn't an active Mormon, and so I think that's kind of funny that he was kind of disgruntled with his religion or despaired from his religion at the moment, but yet he was still practicing, and he was very much a follower. George Washington Hayduke, he's the rebel, he's been out of prison, he's kind of like a MacGyver guy, and I like that about him. It's funny that he's George Washington, based off of a presidential man that made a lot of aggressive moves as well in the past when he was president. And so the similarities there I find kind of funny. Dr. A.K. Sarvis, I kind of feel like he is a double life man. His relationship with Bonnie is quite interesting, but as he's kind of terrorizing other people with the destruction that he's doing to limit dams and environmental changes that are going to sustain the environment in its natural state as much as possible. On the other hand, he is fixing people as a doctor, so and living a very perfect and high status kind of life, but yet he's kind of divvying into the realm of naughtiness, which I think is a stark contrast. And then Bonnie, bless Miss Bonnie and her little recycled bubble that she lives in. I find her to be very interesting. In some ways, she's very loyal to her causes, but I also feel like she has some level of independence, but also a level of dependence that she needs fulfilled. I also find her to be a bit of a risk taker with her relationships. And so she's kind of an interesting lady to me. I always thought by the end of the book that she would end up pregnant with Hayduke's baby, but it didn't happen, so I was kind of surprised about that. I wouldn't want to see a little Hayduke running around, I guess. So they're aiming to save the earth and water, and Glen Canyon Dam is their main objective. And I believe Canyon's spelled wrong. I apologize about that. The Sand County Almanac is nonfiction education, one individual expressing a passion for the environment, humans, and animals, based on the understanding of natural history and philosophy, and is divided into 3 books. So the first book was my favorite book, actually. I liked how it was chronological by time. Maybe I am becoming a little bit of a farmer's girl here. The second book is talking about different places and not in particularly a time order. And then the last book, I got lost a little bit and had to reread it a little bit. Actually, I listened to it when I was traveling back and forth to work, and I had to start over a couple times. Don't know if it was because I was tired or my brain was thinking about other things, but of the philosophy of the governmental involvement, policymakers, and ethics was what that was about. So all in all, I thought it was a good book, and I enjoyed learning things such as the bur oak tree being fire retardant and where prairies came from and the importance of prairie fires. thought all of those things were very interesting, as well as some traveling of birds. I thought that was quite interesting as well. The life of plants, humans, animals, as observed in the literature. We could have found this in several other places. I just picked two. And the honey tree, the deep connection with nature used to describe the journey of self-love. The triumph used as the tree as the primary object. Trees are here because of water. Also, they gain their strength in their trunk because of the nutrients in the water that they gain. And they tell us a lot about how much water there has or hasn't been with the rings that they have inside their trunk. Living Like Weasels by Ann Dillard insinuates that weasels live by need and humans by want. We are tied by the same amount of water available to all. Animal or human, we have to sustain our needs to live. Gary Snyder's The Etiquette of Freedom. Freedom to treat the world with respect or not. So I'd like to say my summary of that would be when we choose not to protect our water sources, they can cause our demise. And then Jack London's To Build a Fire, which was one of my favorite essays of the whole class. Water forms as ice, flowing under ice and snow. Water vapor show water's diversity. But I found that this one, as the gentleman was dying, it reminded me a lot of a show that we watched called Love Comes Softly, where a little boy died freezing to death. And when you think about that from a pathophysiology standpoint, as water cools, it slows down. And so the elements move smaller and they take a wider stride as they go. And so as the body cools, the swelling in the cells and the moving further apart and the slowing down causes the death. So water can sustain life or take it depending on the environment that it's in. So actually I had to do a little bit of research because a couple times throughout this class, the willow tree was brought up. And so I wanted to do a little bit of research about what the willow tree signifies. And so the purity, peacefulness is one of the things that they were talking about, particularly when it's by water. John Taven's Hawks of Men, A Weekend in the Male Wilderness was not my favorite piece, but it did talk about the purity of nature and water to help connect to our natural instincts. And Henry David Thoreau's Solitude, where water is a symbol of peacefulness, presented by showing the effect wind has on water pools, rain brightening one's spirit, sustaining the ability to grow food, symbolism of willow trees used to symbolize nature, fruitfulness, and life, also represents the balance, knowledge, and growth and synchronization. Standing stable and withstanding the greatest of challenges, and trees growing towards the water and the ponds are not lonely, but a house, and sustain life. Thought that was a powerful statement. And John Updike's The Crow in the Woods shows us how we can contaminate our water to keep things clean. So in this segment, our water is contaminated. So far, water sustains life, found in all life forms, does not like to be manipulated, causes erosion, has a relationship with wind and air, and it cleans. In Barry Lopez's Appalachia, willow trees, again, we talk about willow trees, and the creek bottom were discussed as a contrast to the death of animals found in the roads. No water, as the trees have means, no water, like the trees have water, so they can live, but the animal that is dead there doesn't have any. That's kind of the metaphor here, is the contrast between the two. In William Stafford's Traveling Through the Dark, the river was contaminated with death when it usually brings life. When the gentleman pushed the deer with a live baby inside into the river. In the Sand Creek Almanac by Aldo Leopold, which we talked about a little bit earlier, makes references in numerous times to farming practices and contamination of water sources, foul use of water, and lack of conservation. The policymakers are attacked in Book 3 regarding conservation and the prevention policies containing water and land. So our water is contaminated. Touching the earth, and Langston Hughes, the Negro Speaks of Rivers. It relates to the fact that African Americans were the first farmers, and they were conservationists, protecting our resources with limited resources and pure human effort. Even though we have new technology and chemicals to use to promote production, we need to reflect on the first farmers of our land and emulate their passion for conservation and protection of our water sources. In Langston Hughes's The Negro Speaks of Rivers, Langston uses the freedom of rivers to trace African American history and to contrast in the fact that his race was not free. The erosion of the rivers relates to the breaking down and success of the African American culture. I think this essay relates to the fact that we are not really free to treat the world however we want, as there are consequences to our behavior that is presented by the environment itself. Norman McLean uses descriptions of water and relationships to help us understand one of the largest themes in this book, which is that we humans are small compared to the vastness of the land and bodies of water which we rely upon. Water quality is not a small issue and should not be treated as one. Understanding the relationships between the environment and human behavior relates to the prevention of nitrogen and phosphorus contaminating our water sources. These essays heed warnings. Rachel Carson's Of Man and the Stream of Time again uses history to discuss the damage to the earth and its water sources. Arrogance of the human race must be addressed to prevent this, and I see that is an issue in this project. This piece talks some about the reflection to determine if the way we are doing things is the way we should. I think this whole piece is relatable to my project and has me passionate as ever to share the knowledge that I've gained through my classes this summer and for my work in epidemiology at our hospital. Union of Concerned Scientists, World Scientists Warning to Humanity was my favorite out of these three. This piece segments out each area relating to environmental concern and need for preservation. This essay spends some time specifically discussing with facts about water quality in the areas of water sources and oceans. Soil discusses agricultural practices as well as animal production, which can contribute to water contamination if feces is not managed correctly. What we call that is runoff. Irreversible and reversible damage discussed relating to where we are in this project to change the water quality score for Smith Center. But the greater picture is to improve and sustain water quality for all. In Wallace Stinger's Wilderness Letter, it presents that wilderness built humans. Wants humans to know what would be missing if industrialism alienates nature. This essay speaks to water quality in a way that we learn many other things. We learn that it's gone and no longer available for use. The author is warning and educating that I'm attempting to do this with this project as well. I don't know how many times I've had to learn, when it's gone, it's gone. Sometimes you can't get those things back. Carson's Of Man and the Stream of Time again uses history to discuss damage of the earth and its water sources. Arrogance of the human race must be addressed to prevent this, and that is an issue in this project. Yeah, I apologize because that is an extra slide that doesn't need to be there. Water is a precious gift, according to Lucille Clifton's Sonora Desert poem and Linda Hogan's What Holds the Water, What Holds the Light. And Sonora's poem uses the lack of water as denoted in the desert to show strength and survival. This relates as farming practices vary depending on what the rainfall levels are. Deserts have floods as well, and the runoff can be very damaging as the land is not as resilient in managing large volumes of water. In the end, it's all about not having what one needs to survive and finding a way to manage as it is done in the desert, where life-sustaining water is limited. Conservation is the key. What holds the water? What holds the light? It talks about disconnection of humans with nature, not treating water as a gift. The poem talks about the slender orange newts coming to life in the rain, and I just loved that little part. It talks about the earth being a vessel for life and water, and that vessels made from the earth are used to help provide life-sustaining water to humans. This relates to the water quality and contamination, as all earth feeds water sources, so we must care for the earth to protect our water from ruin. The earth is a vessel to feed us. Sure, we're seeing the after effects of that, of a flood. To think about climbing up in a tree and riding out the storm scares me, but in John Moore's A Windstorm in the Forest, it seems exhilarating to ride what you wish to save and observe nature in its aggressive state. The challenge in regard to water quality is that runoff as well as the riding wanting us to understand what we need to do to get into action. First-hand knowledge is what we need to know to be able to really understand. I believe this speaks to prevention of water. Contamination as a knowledge is a key. The individual authors, I did a little bit of research on them, not just in what they were presenting to us. And Linda Hogan in particular, which you can find something on all of them, has a little quote here that says, "Between Earth and the Earth's atmosphere, the amount of water remains constant. There is never a drop more, never a drop less. This is a story of circular infinity, of a planet birthing itself." So this tells me that the authors have a passion for water quality and water preservation. Supporting research, answers to research questions, objectives, goals, and a thesis for this project. But there's one more thing. I got to do something. I took some time making this presentation, and I've remade it twice now over the last 4 weeks. I wanted it to be inclusive and meet all the goals and objectives of the assignment. And actually, this last week's readings really helped complete what I was working on. As I finished, I took a 2-hour break this afternoon, and I think to contemplate what was presented and come up with a to-do list. So I'd like to visit with the county extension agent and see what gaps in education for the community that I could help facilitate. Band with the city library to promote the readings and this slide presentation to increase environmental and literary understanding of the subject, with the end result being more advocacy, and offer to assist with the yearly Women in Agriculture program. And there could be several more, like doing some education in the school through the 4-H, quite a few other things that you could do. But I wanted to be a little bit brief and maybe do something that maybe I could start with. I want to say that most all the farmers and ranchers that live here in our county are very good with water resources, chemical use, and livestock runoff. I don't know if they were in the past, as I didn't always live on a farm or have the interests that I do now. I think it's vital that if the education and action is going to take place here in Smith County and in other rural farming communities, that a respectful approach to farmers must be taken. So we're back to that thesis again. Although the global decline in the quality of water is known to affect all aspects of life, two main chemicals introduced by humans are the catalysts for this major environmental problem: phosphorus and nitrogen. I hope you agree that the above thesis was proven through this project. I further pray that your daily activities will include concern for water quality at a higher level than before. Thank you so much. I enjoyed this project.